Well, welcome. It's nice to have you all back here with us again. It's wonderful that we can gather like this. It gives us an opportunity to come together, to pray, to reflect, and to share with one another. And again, it'll be so nice to see one another as we wait till the end of the program. I'm delighted today to welcome Sister Teresa Maya from San Antonio, Texas, who will speak to us about hoping together. Our hope as a council for religious was that she would make it today. As you know, Texas was hard hit with storms, power failures, water, and heat issues. And besides that, she had her own concerns for her sisters and community. But she is with us today, and we are thrilled to have her. The focus for today is hope, a theme we have followed this whole year. When our hope has been challenged, we have longed for hope and wondered how to hope. Today's reflection will invite us into a conversation about our call to religious life, to consecrated life, as a vocation to hope. We can only hope when we are in it together. So please take your prayer sheets now and let us enter into our prayer.
Let us pray. God of hope, you have called us by our names, and we belong to you. As members of your family, as consecrated women and men religious, we believe that you have created us in your image. You lead us in your light and guide us on our journey of life, always keeping our vision bright. You nourish us and gift us with all that we need. You are our way and call us to be hope for all in the world who are in need of your love and care. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. For I know well the plans I have in mind for you, plans for your welfare and not for woe, so as to give you a future of hope.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. My name is Sister Teresa Maya. I'm an Incarnate Word sister from San Antonio. I'm currently serving as congregational leader of our community. For 3 years, I was also the president of the LCWR. It was a beautiful experience, and I pray for the current presidents today. Our reflection that we had Saturday is really centered on hope and how hope requires community, but it also requires faith and it requires action. I hope it's helpful to you, and I hope it creates other opportunities to share about what is hope calling all of us as men and women religious. God bless you all. And so I invite you, just at the beginning of this day, what are the pictures on your iPhone or the images on your mind from the last few weeks? And more importantly, we need to ask ourselves this question: why do we keep longing for hope? Why do we keep longing for hope? And not just because we're part of the human family. Why do we keep longing for hope? Why, if we are religious, supposedly we should be giving hope to everyone. And yet, if we're really honest with one another, all of us, whether we're one of those sisters that I visited, or someone that's in the in-between, serving and somewhat active, or have been online for a very long time, when the day goes quiet, we know we're longing for hope. And why is it? What is that call. And I feel, and I've learned that already the longing for hope is the beginning of the gift of hope. We know there's something else that we need. We know there's something else that'll get us through the week, the day, the month. And now we have no idea what new surprises are in store for us. I'll tell you a bit about that more and what happened here in Texas. But as I planned for this reflection, and this is just my reflection, all of you could probably give a better presentation. And my hope is just to spark a conversation among all of us. As I was thinking about this hope business and where is my hope and how much hope do I have and do I have any hope and do my sisters have hope? Where do we find it? I remembered a conversation I had with a friend of mine. Her husband is now the ambassador to Algiers, the Mexican ambassador to Algiers. And she went on a trip to the desert, which is the Saharan desert. And she sent me these pictures. So I'm going to share them with you. These are her pictures. This is the Saharan desert in the Algerian side. And, you know, real desert. And it was just incredible, powerful. But then she told me this story. She said there are trees in that desert with roots that can go as deep as 50 meters. Now you do the math, that's a lot of feet. I don't know, 120, 130 feet. And I keep going back to this image because this last year, and it's been a year, you all started in New York and then the rest of us followed. It's been a year where we have had, no matter what, to deepen our roots. Some of us were better at it than others. Some of us really went to that contemplative thing, very, you know, like fish in water. Other of us had to struggle, but in the end, this has been a year for a lot of spiritual growth and a lot of deepening. So like those trees, we need to go into that part of our lives and deepen those roots so that when the storms that come, and more will come, our roots are strong and can tap into that water. So what call is embedded in this longing for hope? How do we get to authentic Christian hope? And as Pope Francis has reminded us over and over again, hope is not optimism. Hope is not denying reality or pretending that things are going to be, you know, like my sisters ask me when the pandemic is going to be over. Terry, when's it going to be over? I'm like, I don't know. So how do we come to hope together? I'd like to suggest this morning that we talk about hope in three movements or three different components of hope. The first is faith, the second is community, and the third is action or active. Hope needs faith, it needs community, we need to hope together, and it needs movement, it needs action. So let's start with hope as a matter of faith. Hope is a matter of faith. Last time I was in New York, I was with the Dominican Sisters of Hope. And because of their name, I had to read a lot about hope. So I thought, you know, how smart of me. I'm going to reread Pope Benedict XVI's Spes Salvi. Now, I needed a lot of coffee because Pope Benedict is a theologian, a systematic theologian at that. And as I was reading through it, I found this quote in Pope Benedict's Spes Salvi encyclical. It says, faith is the substance of hope. Faith is the substance of hope. And if you know the way Pope Benedict writes, he chooses words very carefully. And substance is a really big word in theology. The essence, the nature of, the core of, the heart of hope, the point of hope. There's so many ways we could understand that just simple statement. And so it's simple and yet profound, because in order to get the hope, we have to ask ourselves, how is our faith? How is our faith? Many of my sisters that I visited last week said, that I've always wanted to be a contemplative or to have more time for prayer, but I'm kind of tired. Can we just like have some action now? And some of them told me, yeah, it was okay for a while, but we're like, can we just get out there? Can we help someone? And so I said to them, we all were longing for this deep contemplative life, but we forgot that there's a desert and that there's a dark night of the soul, and that contemplation is not easy. It's also a gift. So at this time, we have to ask ourselves, what have we learned about our faith this year? What questions have we caught ourselves asking? Even if we didn't confess them to other people, because maybe we're like, oh my God, why am I asking that question? Biblical events, and we have lived through some biblical events, have called forth biblical questions. They have called forth biblical questions. And one of the best little books I read during this year is a book by Walter Brueggemann, a little small reflection that he calls Virus as a Summons to Faith, Biblical Reflection in a Time of Loss, Grief, and Uncertainty. And what he does is that he goes back into the biblical narrative, and he makes us notice that even though we're very modern and scientific and everything else, most of us have ended up going and wondering about larger and deeper questions. Most of us have been even saying things like, why is God letting this happen? Why, what could this mean? Is it, we've even talked about all the plagues. I'm telling you, here in Texas, we're just waiting for locusts now. But we have gone into that biblical wonderment. We have been asking ourselves the question, why? Is this God's will on humanity? Is this the end of the world? I used to joke to my sisters, the end of the world is here. It's going to, and they would get really anxious and upset. And then I knew that's their question. That's what they were asking themselves. So we look at the news, what happened January the 6th, what's going on across the world. We're worried. We know this looks, almost like the book of Revelation. And so Walter Brueggemann is saying, we name God around this, but in our searching, but in the end, we're noticing that our little system is ceasing to be. And its cessation is caused by the will. And so it's breaking our categories. We arrive in our honesty and fear, he says, at an unspeakable for which our faith tradition has provided proximate language. There's something that our faith is challenged to address. And like the book of Job, God is mystery. God is a tremendous mystery. And so our faith has indeed been challenged. But to get to hope, we need faith. To get to hope, we need faith. So he says in the introduction to his book about Jesus, he says, his power, unlike the power of the world most notices, is the force of transformative vulnerability and foolish wisdom. That strange power is now entrusted to his faithful community. It requires some daring effort in our current crises for us to imagine what form that power may now take. As we do that work of imagining, we are reminded that the festal cry, Hosanna, before it was glad acclamation, was a passionate petition. Save us, we pray. That strange mix of acclamation and petition is a proper mood in which we now do our faith most faithfully. In which we now do our faith most faithfully. So we need to really be honest in our own faith life. in the faith life of our communities, of our charismatic families, of our church. This situation has shaken our faith. So with Job, we stand and we have to just stand before the mystery of that tremendous God and say, we are learning that our categories, our understanding has not been enough. There's still work to be done. So as we go through this reflection, I ask all of us, I ask myself, how have the multiple pandemics, and we know there have been many, challenged my faith? How has my spiritual life been impacted by the massive global events we have been called to witness? What has happened with my faith? So just take a few moments and honestly go back to the big questions you have asked over the year, to the statements you've made, sometimes jokingly, sometimes not. It is the Lenten season. It is a great time for us to do metanoia, to turn around, to go deeper into this. So I'll leave you with my questions. You might find other answers. Secondly, I want to talk about how hope happens in community. Hope happens in community. I think that is the greatest learning for most of my sisters in the human family. What has been the hardest during this time is the isolation. Because when you're alone, it makes it a lot harder to hope. It's not impossible, but it's a lot harder. I can tell you that we had a very interesting storm in Texas, and you've all probably been laughing at us over that. I don't lie. I know you've been laughing at us because I know you get snow and you know what to do with it, and we don't, and it was not fun. But I will tell you the hardest thing was not getting the snow. It was not, staying at home. It was not losing the heat. That was bad. It was bad. It was losing the power, because all of a sudden we couldn't talk to one another. The cell phones weren't working, foolish us. Of course, those towers are powered and no power in the towers. That meant cell phone was really bad. We didn't have Zoom anymore. We just were totally isolated. And to me personally, those dark, cold, but disconnected days were the hardest of the entire year, because then I realized how much help the phone, the FaceTime, the internet, the Zoom had been during this time, because they had allowed us to stay connected. Over and over again, I've come to realize that when we are alone, when we're afraid, something magic happens simply by being with another person. Last week, as I visited each one of my sisters, I couldn't solve any of their challenges. But when we ended our conversations, there was hope in our hearts. And it's just because we were together, just because we talked to one another. For sure, I think that we have learned that we need each other. We have learned we need each other. And I cannot imagine of a more powerful lesson for North American religious, because we are so proud of our independence. We are so fiercely independent. I'll do it. I don't need anyone. And all of a sudden, a phone call gave us a lot of hope. Learning Zoom and seeing people on the screen. I mean, teaching my mom Zoom so that we could see her. Every once in a while, we're just looking at the ceiling fan, but she was delighted that she could see our faces, and her granddaughter. So we have learned we need each other. That is a powerful lesson for this time. But we've also learned that hope happens when we connect. There's magic. There's something that's sparked in our being together. To be communities of hope, at least this is what I've learned with my own sisters, 2 key words: vulnerability and accompaniment, vulnerability and accompaniment. And we have to absolutely recognize that we have lived through, survived, grieved, struggled, feared. There have been long nights and long weeks for all of us. For those communities that struggled with COVID or someone got sick, we live like 15 days at a time. Someone got COVID, let's wait 15 days and then another 15 days. Some of us have not been able to say goodbye with the rituals that we are used to. I cannot tell you the most desolate, horrible things that happened in San Antonio when our sisters passed away and only 10 of us could go to a graveside. No mass, nothing. But in the end, if we reflect back to the highs and lows of the year, there's always people whenever we felt consoled. There's always someone else. There's always a name and a face, the right phone call, an email, a chat on the phone, a Zoom, something happened, but it involved others. So what are the images of hope that you've had this year? What are those moments? And I realized that our news media feeds off bad news. And then we kind of stay on those news and we watch them over and over again and like 10 versions. I don't know, we read it on the Times, we watch the PBS News Hour, and then we're on the Twitter feed. And in the end, I found myself always stopping in the images that gave me hope and praying with them. And I realized the other day that in every one of those images that really struck me, that moved me deeply through the year, there were other people. There was always a group of people. And some of those images I recover here. And, there's a group of medical people or the crowds that went out to say, it's time for this country to revisit its systemic racism, or the way families were able to find each other and just love each other. The hope that our medical professionals have given throughout the year in so many different ways. And I mean, how we've been present to one another in our grieving. And one of the images that moved me most is I am Mexican. And it's this image. The first time in I don't know how many centuries, there were no celebrations for the Virgin of Guadalupe in Mexico City. That's the Basilica. But I cried with this image because what they did is they invited everyone to bring a candle. And then a group of volunteers worked days and days and then lit all these candles in the plaza outside the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Again, groups of people doing something for one another. So embracing our vulnerability, the beauty and the fragility of being human has been critical to this time. Being together. As men and women religious, it's been a good thing. And, blessed pandemic that it is teaching us that we need one another, Because sometimes we think we're the ones that need to give all the time. But experiencing the vulnerability, the aloneness, the need for presence from others has given us an incarnational view of the human family. We need each other to be able to hope. We've known that, but now we've experienced it at a very profound level. And of course, when I talk about community and vulnerability, we cannot forget that we are followers of Christ. We are men and women religious because we fell in love with Jesus. And so I also think it's time for us in this hoping together to remember that Jesus' presence in the Eucharist or in a spiritual communion that so many of us had to do over the year, and in one another, in the community of faith is critical. But I learned also that we need to be accompanied by Jesus. We need to allow Jesus to accompany us, but we also need to accompany Jesus. We also need to accompany Jesus. And as I reflected on what this meant throughout the year, I had to go to music and art and image and poetry. Times like these are really hard to put into words. Most of us have had a hard time putting them into words. And even when we pick up a book, it's hard concentrating. I found myself that even writing a letter in the last few weeks has just been, it takes me forever. And but that's when images and music and poetry come. And I'm going to show you the two paintings that got me through this year, because that's when I really understood what it means to be accompanied by Jesus and accompanying Jesus. And one of them is this image on your screen. It is The Road to Emmaus by Janet Brooks Gerloff. And I love it because there's the two disciples and there's the silhouette of Jesus walking right beside them. Jesus is there, even if we hardly notice, And the second image, which I shared with my sisters last year, in the middle of the hardest days, or darkest days, I'd say, is by Daniel Bono. He's a painter that has done a lot of works for our healthcare ministry here in Texas, Christus Health. And I asked his permission to be able to give this image to all of my sisters. And the image is called Jesus Wept. Jesus Wept. And here it is on your screen. It is that moment when Jesus visits Bethany and the sisters say, "If only you had been here." And in the picture on your screen, Jesus embraces Martha, and there are tears in his eyes. And when I think of hope as being together, as needing community, this image of Jesus holding all of us in his embrace comes to mind all the time. And if you look closer into his face, you can see the tears streaming from his eyes, and just the embrace and the hold. So I told my sisters, as I would tell you today, how many times have we experienced this consolation of knowing that we are right there in Jesus's embrace? And that's what I have prayed, not just for my sisters, but for religious everywhere, that we remember that's where we are. We are in Jesus's arms. And so community needs to come together, needs to embrace vulnerability, needs accompaniment. And I ask all of you, all of us, I ask myself to be real honest. When did I feel most vulnerable during the past 12 months? How did I experience the accompaniment, the presence or accompaniment of others? When was I able to reach out to others? What were the key moments when I accompanied others? What was the grace? What was the grace? And to give us a little bit of time to just hold that question, I'm going to try something a little bit daring. So I'm going to invite you to go to your chat and try to go to a website called menti.com. You can click on it right there on your screen. And let's see if you can open it up. I know it's hard, so if it doesn't work, don't worry about it. And if you don't like new stuff, don't worry about it. And there's a code that you type. And what you're going to do is that you're going to click on the chat, it's there, and then go to that Mentimeter or menti.com, type in that code. So remember, the code is 5259. You'll see what is on my screen right now. You'll see this, and there's where you type the code, and then you move to type a few words. So my invitation now is that for just a minute or two, some of you try it. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to it later. And just type 6 key words that speak of the grace you've received this year, lowercase and no plurals. And don't stress if the Zoom disappears, come back in, they're gonna let you in. And if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And if some of you want to do it, do it. It's the freedom of the people of God. But let's just take a moment. What is the grace I have experienced by being accompanied in my vulnerability the last year? So just try it for a few moments. And we'll go back to that a little later, but now I'm going to move into the third moment. Hope needs movement. Hope needs movement. It needs action. And that will be the third section of this reflection this morning. Hope needs action. It needs movement. Most of us belong to religious institutes that are apostolic. I hope we have contemplatives here in some way, but most of us do. No matter how old or sick or frail, we keep asking ourselves, what can we do? What is ours to do? I visited my oldest sisters, they're like 93, and they're asking me, Daddy, what can we do? So many people are losing their jobs. So many people are hungry. So many people are alone. And so we have to remember that if faith nourishes our hope, if accompaniment rekindles it, then we have to be a people that goes forth. En salida, that's what Pope Francis says in Spanish, because there can be no authentic hope unless it goes forth towards others. Hope creates the space for possibility, for humanization, for closeness. Hope is always active. It is contagious. It moves us towards others. That's why it's a mystery. That's why it's a gift. Pope Francis just wrote the encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Of course, I hope he had called it Fratelli et Sorelli Tutti, but that's all right. He has the most beautiful reflection on the parable of the Good Samaritan. In the Spanish version of Fratelli Tutti, because there's versions always are changed a little bit. He calls it the icon, that we need to look at the parable as an icon. And I think that this morning we need to be reminded of hope as active, because it is an admirable contradiction that to have hope, you need to offer it. You need to give it away. You need to give it to others. And so hope, I would say, in what Pope Francis is inviting us, hope is always action toward the other. Action toward the other. The parable in Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis says, the parable eloquently presents the basic decision we need to make in order to rebuild our wounded world. In the face of so much pain and suffering, our only course is to imitate the Good Samaritan. Is to imitate the Good Samaritan. What a remarkable paradox. In order to get hope, we gotta move. And sometimes as we move, we discover the hope along the way. So instead of waiting passively for hope to just happen or for us to receive that gift, We need to move in that direction. We need to move toward others, toward the common good, toward less polarization, toward mutual understanding, toward encuentro. I'm reminded that when I read John Meacham's book, The Soul of America, he wrote in the book, the opposite of fear is hope. Fear is about limits. Hope is about growth. Fear casts its eyes warily, even shiftily across the landscape. Hope looks forward toward the horizon. Fear points at others, assigning blame. Hope points ahead, working for a common good. Fear pushes away. Hope pulls others closer. Fear divides. Hope unifies. So we need as men and women religious to be about hope, to really be about hope. And we need to ask ourselves, what are the apostolic dimensions of hope, the active dimensions of hope, the going forth dimensions of hope? And I want to suggest two, and you all are going to have to think of more. I think meaning making and storytelling are critical. And the cool thing about it is that you don't have to be 50 or 60. You can be 95, or you can be my 107-year-old sister that still tells stories. And so I think meaning making is critical at this time. But we have to be honest. We have to ask the questions that are really in our heart. You know, what does this mean? Why is this happening? Where is God in all of this? And we need to be careful how we answer, because people can see right through us when we're using boilerplate responses, or when we don't really mean them or feel the answers. When I think of active hope, I want to go back to my Texas storm. Speaking of meaning making, that is our campus with snow, a lot of it. And if I am honest with myself and with our sisters, a storm of that dimension, so many people without power and water or access to food in so many places, or watching all those supermarkets that lost power throw away mountains of food from all the dairy and meat and fish products. I had to brave the supermarket and go in and to see the mountains of food that they were just going to push out and throw out. And I realized we need to ask ourselves the questions, why? Why? And we need to sit with sometimes just no answer. And we need to be there for one another to give us permission so that we can find meaning together. Another intuition that I'll share with you, and you probably, you'll have your own, is that idea of life story, of storytelling. Another book I read this year that I absolutely loved is called Life is in the Transitions, Mastering Change at Any Age by Bruce Feiler. And the reason I share this with you is because he talks about, we can't ignore that, life is in these transitions, and that's more true today than ever. And we can't ignore these themes in our life. We can't wish them away. We have to accept them, name them, mark them, share them, and eventually convert them into new and vital fuel for remaking our life stories. Just think about everything we have lived through as communities, as individuals, in our families, how many people we've lost, what all of this has meant. It's a great disruption. He calls them life quakes. Like really major earthquakes, high on the Richter scale. I know in New York you don't have earthquakes, but a big event, you've had some. And how they cause tremendous disruption, but they also cause us to grow. And he says in this book, it's no longer like there's going to be a transition every once in a while. They're going to be happening all the time. What stories do we tell each other? That's why gospel is story. Narrative is a critical way forward, is an active way of hoping, telling the stories that give meaning to our lives, telling the stories that bring us out and make us move toward other is critical. So now I would like to invite you to your own conversations in the breakout groups. And using these questions, which I will also put in the chat, don't worry. What movement or going forth does the icon of the Good Samaritan invoke in me? And be realistic. You know, we're a little older. So no, we're not going to go to the soup kitchen. No, we're not going to go to the border to do something. But there is something for us to do. And what new areas for active hope do I see emerging that we can move into as we are? That we can move into as we are. So I'm going to post those questions in the chat. And then the super incredible like tech people that are part of this team are going to send you to breakout groups. What movement going forth does the icon of the Good Samaritan invoke in me? What new areas for active hope do I see emerging that we can move into as we are? So have a beautiful conversation, and I hope you can build on what I've said or even create something better. We'll see you soon. 15 minutes of breakout. Well, welcome back. Brother Gregory will now call on some of us just so we can get a taste of where your conversation went.
Thank you. We're very intrigued with a comment made by Sister Joanne Callahan. So if we may ask her, please, to expound on sending Fratelli Tutti to our politicians.
We had a great discussion, actually, and it was Sister Cruz that said that when they looked at Fratelli Tutti and they had to do it as chapter preparation, that they decided that they should send the book to local politicians. And we all thought it was the best idea of something, a real good action, and that they should read this section on the Good Samaritan and on politics.
Seems like there's a terrific overlap between the two in this great document by Pope Francis. Okay, thank you very, very much. Do we have Sister Mary Doyle possibly, please?
In our group, we spoke about the importance of kindness and how we noticed that people are reaching out more to others, just as strangers, but making profound difference in that way. Also, we talked about the importance of community, that we rely on one another and extend ourselves more to one another. I'm sorry that I wish I could remember everyone's comments, because in our group, it was a good group to be part of.
Thank you very, very much for those sentiments, Sister Mary. I'd like to now call on, please, from another group, Sister Carol Melzoff, if I'm saying that right. Sister Carol, are you still with us? And can you please share some of the highlights of the discussion in your group?
We also had a great group. And I think the fact that the accompaniment of one another on our journey really is an important factor if we wish to extend this concept of hope. We share it with one another in community, and we can branch out from that through the internet, through cards, through notes, through phone calls, to share those elements of hope. And the accompaniment is the key to this sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much to you and your group members. We see a terrific note here from Sister Marie Josie Seide, if I'm saying that right. Encourage others around us to see the aspects that bring life in the midst of challenging times. Sister Marie Josie, can you peel the onion a bit more for us on your comment and what your group discussed, please?
Okay, it's more a personal comment. What I want to say is that for example, during the pandemic, in the midst of all we've been going through, or we're still going through, we see an enrichment of the faith of so many through the possibility of the online faith sharing that was given us. So I see a great plus in that. And from my personal experience, I'm Haitian born. In the Haitian communities, I have experienced so many opportunities that was given to the community to increase their faith, to strengthen their faith through online masses, through online prayer and novenas and retreats that we shared online, and people sharing how they went through, they're going through the pandemic and what it did to them with the support of faith group online. So that's more or less what I mean.
Thank you very, very much for that deep sharing there. We have time for just a couple of more. We have, looks like Sister Emily Massey, if I'm saying that right, who talks about here having trouble getting on at first. So time was short in the group, but you felt the frustration of not connecting with family and friends. Talk to us, please, Sister Emily, a little bit more about some of this frustration, please.
Just being locked up, and earlier in the first couple of months, where some of what Sister Maya alluded to, we said we made lots and lots of phone calls, and then, but then given the time that we were able to indulge in other kinds of prayer that maybe when with our hectic life we were eliminating for a while. So that was, if you will, a blessing of being tied up. And then, just the ability, first of all, we couldn't go to mass at all. And then when we were able to go, at least that gave us some connection to other people that we could support them, since their parish life had stopped too, engaging, coming for other activities. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that sharing. I think we've got time for one more here. We've got a lovely comment from Sister Elizabeth Hill about great hope in the balance of the young embracing the old. Tell us about, please, Sister Elizabeth Hill, this intergenerational coming together.
I cannot take credit for that contribution, but one of our sisters has had experience at our mother house. And we've observed over this time the wonderful interchange between our younger sisters who are tech savvy and the eagerness of our older sisters to remain connected. And so that reaching out from the young who have these skills and the old who embrace and support them, and then the constant interaction. And so we're just excited about the fact that we have been able to stay connected. And as Teresa was saying, that's such a human need and such an important part of this whole experience. And one sister recommended that a technology curriculum be developed so that people would really be skilled and be able to function effectively in this new arena.
Great. Thank you so very, very much. I'm just going to read a final comment before we turn the meeting back over to others. Group number 7, Sister Jackie Ned, RSM, says the pandemic has brought us together in a strange way. We reach out to others more by calling and praying for others in the community and society. We are more present to others in different ways, and we will probably continue doing so long after the pandemic is over. This pandemic has really created a new normal for us and forced us to be innovative. I spent 30 years in big pharmaceuticals. I thought that was innovative. I've seen us in religious life be just as innovative this last year. So thank you everyone for your wonderful comments and heartfelt thoughts. I'm going to turn the meeting back over to some others at this time.
If I may, I just want to say some final words. And first of all, I want to thank you all for engaging in the conversation. Like I said, I've tried to get my sisters to use technology for 5 years. I never dreamed that it would happen so quickly. So I am delighted that you're asking for a curriculum, but also I'll hear all the ways in which we have connected. So just to finish today, I want to say we need to be reminded that we are called. And we were not, it's not that we were called. We have been called, but today we are called. And to do things like what inspired us. This is those of you that were able to go on the mentee. This is what you wrote. And I want you to notice the words that are biggest: friendship, community, love, support. And all of those we can do for one another, no matter how frail, no matter how old, no matter how limited we are. We can all love, we can be friends, we can support, and that way we'll get the hope. So I just want to finish back with my little tree in the middle of the Sahara Desert. As men and women religious, we are indeed called to deepen those roots into our spiritual traditions, into our following and accompanying of Jesus, so that we can be hope, active hope, for the time we have been called to live. So thank you all for who you are and what you have done, the incredible, beautiful ways you have been present to so many people. Because if we do this, if we hope together, we have hope for our human family. God bless you for who you are. And thank you for inviting me for this reflection this morning.
The new dawn blooms as we free it, for there is always light. If only we're brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it.
In the name of everyone who has been here today, Sister Tere from Brooklyn and Rockville Center Diocese, we want to say a big, big thank you. A thank you that the words don't even mean what we want to say. Your presence, your passion for who we are, and your reality checks on what it's been like for all of us to live through these last months, almost a year, but all of the lessons that have come forward for us if we're willing to pay attention and to listen. So you've given us a lot to think about, a lot to pray about, but also a wonderful experience of sharing with each other and sharing from your inspiration. So I can't thank you enough. And I'm going to ask everybody now, whether you're muted or not, to just give you a round of applause, because you deserve that and more. So.
Wonderful.
Okay. I want to thank the Council for Religious, who has helped with planning for today, especially Peggy Conway and Eileen Halloran for the prayer, and for Greg for monitoring. Don't you think he needs his own TV show? He is wonderful. He's just great. Thank you, Greg.
Absolutely agree.
Yes. And to Mother Maria, Brother Joe, and
Thank you.
Alexandra Castellanos, who was in the background, who, with their technical magic, and that's all I keep calling it, is that it's magic that makes all of this happen for us in really easy ways for us. We can't thank all of them enough. And then, of course, to all of you for coming again to pray, to reflect, to connect with each other, to see one another. Nice to see other people. So thank you. Stay tuned, because there are more programs coming, but there'll be information coming out about those soon. And if you just stay on for another minute or so, you'll be able to see everybody else who took part today. So God bless. Thank you all.